through the trip to the cross. We started 2 weeks ago, which is just looking at the sacrificial system. Last week we did the triumphant entry, but we renamed it the royal entry because Jesus came in making claim to be King and Lord. And the people accepted that, but they didn't accept him as the king that he was going to be. So this week we take a look at some of the teaching that was done the second day. He came in, he cleansed the temple. He left, he came back to teach the next day. And that day was a day of teaching all throughout it. And the passage I've chosen is in the middle of that, the passage of the wicked tenants and the cornerstone. But before he gave this parable of the wicked tenant, he taught his disciples by withering up a fig tree and making the background of that is it showed how the temple was promising stuff that was not producing, that the religious leaders were promising what they were doing, and they would wither up. The Pharisees questioned him about what authority he had, and there was sort of a back and forth going kind of thing within his teaching here. And the Pharisees came and said, well, by what authority do you say and do these things? And he said, well, what authority did John do these things? And they thought in their minds and said, well, if we answer this way, we're going to get him, but if we answer this way, it's the same way, the people are not going to like us. And so they didn't say anything on that. And then he tells the parable of the two sons, which one son says, I'm not going to work for you, Father, and yet goes out and works. The other one says, oh, yeah, I'd love to work with you, Father, and doesn't do it. Which one of these sons was the better son? And, of course, the crowd answers. We got this question and answer thing going on within the parable teaching of Jesus this day. And the crowd answers, it's the son that did the work of the Father that is the good son. And so he comes to this parable, the parable of the wicked vine dressers. Tenants is what I'm going to call them through this parable. Here another parable. There was a certain landowner who planted a vineyard and set a hedge around it, dug a wine press in it and built a tower, and he leased it to the vine dressers and went into a far country. Now when vintage time came near, he sent his servants to the vine dressers that they might receive its fruit. And the vine dressers took his servants, beat one, killed one, and stoned another. And again he sent other servants, more than the first, and they did likewise to them. Then last of all, he sent his son to them, saying, they will respect my son. But when the vine dressers saw the son, they said among themselves, this is the heir. Come, let us kill him and seize his inheritance. So they took him and cast him out into the vineyard and killed him. Therefore, when the owner of the vineyard comes, what will he do with these vine dressers? And they said to him, he will destroy those wicked men miserably and lease his vineyard to another vine dresser, who will render to him the fruits of their seasons. This parable is more allegorical than the normal parable, which has one person, 1 point, several people, several characters in this, several things in this, and of course the owner is God within this. He is the maker of the vineyard. He's the maker of the hedge around it. God is the maker of the tower that is there on the land. He's the maker of the wine press that takes in the goods that have been produced. It is a picture of a loving God that produces for us everything that we need. The tenants are the nation of Israel. Those that have come and have gotten so proud of themselves that they think they're all that, and that it's their land when it was given and leased to them. And they can use it as they want, and they can take it into their own possession and make it what they want it to be. The Son, of course, is Jesus. But the servants that are sent in between are the prophets and other great and good leaders that have been sent by God to call the people back unto him. And so the story begins. The household, the owner provides the land and everything that the tenant should need, and the tenant tends the land. It was a sharecropping kind of situation. The tenant would provide the seed, the tenant would do the work, and at the time of harvest, the tenant would give a fourth to a half back to the landowner as rent for what he had done. And so the harvest comes in, and the owners have said to themselves, we don't need to pay this. We've done all the work. It's us that should receive the benefit of this. And so the owner sends his servants, and they take the servants, and they beat some, and they kill others, and they stone others, which is the same thing as saying kill them. So they just abuse the owner's servants. And so the owner sends another set of servants, more than before. Time and time again, the owner sends servants to collect what is due him. And they do the same thing to the second set of messengers. And this is a picture of the great extent of God's love. When we refuse him, when we abuse his message and turn away from it, when we profane his name, he doesn't give up, turn his back on us and walk away. He keeps sending people to bring us the message. And even when every one of his messengers is rejected, God sends his Son. It was clear to God. And it wasn't, should have been clear to God. It was clear to God that they were not going to listen to the messengers and that they would not listen to the Son. And yet, God in his love sent his Son to speak to us, to bring his life before us, to be God transformed here on earth so that we might understand and draw near to him. That's the great extent of God's love. When all else has been abused and turned down, God still sent his Son. And so the landowner sends his Son, and the tenants take the Son and they take him away from the land, and they kill him. And Jesus says to those that are listening in this back and forth kind of thing, what is the landowner going to do with these people? And the people that are listening to him that day say, he will destroy those wicked men miserably and leaves his vineyard to another vine dresser who will render him the fruits of their labors and their seasons. God had produced in this parable, allegorical parable, a place for Israelites to come. He provided them a land that was full of everything that they needed. And they began to think that they were the ones that did all this. And the more they thought of this, the further away from God they got. The further they turned from God. They did not listen to the prophets. And although we don't have a record of any of the biblical prophets being killed, the Bible records that there were many prophets killed as God sent them. So that the named books, we don't have a record of them being killed, but they were prophets and prophets and prophets that God sent. And they were abused and beaten and killed by a people that were called God's people. And Jesus is teaching them that there are people here in this area, really right where he was teaching that day, that are plotting to kill me, the Son, who has come. And you say that God will deal with those people miserably. And you're correct. Because they rejected the Son, because they rejected what Jesus will call in this next passage, the cornerstone. Jesus said to them, have you ever read in the Scriptures, the stone which the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone? This was the Lord's doing, and it is marvelous in our eyes. Therefore I say to you, the kingdom of God will be taken from you and given to a nation bearing the fruits of it. And whoever falls on this stone shall be broken, but on whomever it falls, it will grind him to powder. Now when the chief priests and the Pharisees heard his parables, they perceived that he was speaking of them. And when they sought to lay hands on him, they feared the multitudes, because they took him for a prophet. Last week, as we looked at the royal entry from Psalm 118, we have the words, Hosanna in the highest. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Psalm 118. And from Psalm 118, the day before these teachings, Jesus had heard Psalm 118 called out to him and blessing him, comes these words about the cornerstone. Psalm 118, 22 and 23, about the cornerstone that the builders rejected. The cornerstone in the time of Jesus is the very foundation of a building. We don't have cornerstones today. They're mostly ornamental because we don't necessarily, we build from the ground up, but we have a foundation that goes up before we start from the ground. And so we build on that foundation. But in Jesus' time, there was a cornerstone, and they were massive stones. And from the cornerstone, everything is built, tied together. Two walls tied together, and then finally the third and fourth wall tied to those two walls. The cornerstone is the beginning of every building. The cornerstone of one of the temples, as it was constructed, was 9 foot long and 7 foot wide. That's how strong and big and mighty was the cornerstone of the temple building. And so Jesus is using this passage in 118 to talk about the cornerstone that was rejected. When you're in Jesus' time and you build upon the wrong cornerstone, you can get up for a while. But if you don't build on the right cornerstone, eventually the walls are going to come tumbling down. There's going to be chaos. And you might get the whole building built, but if the cornerstone is wrong, there's not a security in the building, and it's going to come down and crumble down like that. I don't know if you've ever laid wood in your house, wood floors in your house, but if you don't start with a straight edge, you can get 3 or 4 lengths, widths out. But that 5th width, it's going to go crazy after that. And that's the same thing with a cornerstone. You can build off of a wrong cornerstone, but eventually chaos and destruction are going to come. And there, and you're looking around the rubble of that house, that building that has come down, and you find the stone that you had rejected, and you look at the cornerstone you built upon, and you say, well, this would have been the better cornerstone to build upon. This is what we should have built this building upon. This is where we should have started. Jesus is saying, I am the cornerstone that is going to be rejected, that is being rejected at this very moment. And what I will become to some that reject me is a stumbling block, stumbling over that stone. And what I will become to others is just an obliteration of them, a devastation to them when they completely reject me. When we reject the proper cornerstone, disaster comes from that. Chaos comes from that. It comes in building, but it comes in lives also. If we don't choose the proper building of our lives, we can go on just like the people in the wicked vineyard, the wicked men in the vineyard were. We can go on and do well for a while, but soon chaos and destruction is going to come into our lives if we don't build upon the proper cornerstone of our lives. And Jesus is clearly saying, I'm going to be rejected. And to some, I'll be a stumbling block. Maybe they'll just stumble over it enough to where they'll notice the cornerstone and then build their lives upon it. But if they continue to stumble over it and ignore it, that cornerstone is going to bring mass destruction into their spiritual lives. They will spend eternity away from God. They will think they built perhaps a happy life, at least a steady life, but eternity is a different thing. And so they need to accept the cornerstone. We need to accept the cornerstone in building our lives. The parable shows the folly of our ways, that we cannot control the world, that we are not the providers of what we do, as much as we think that we are the ones that do everything. There was a prayer in the Civil War time. Lord, I plowed this ground. Lord, I planted this seed. Lord, I watered the fields. Lord, I hoed the rows. Lord, I went out and I harvested all the things that are there. Lord, I brought these things in and I cooked these things for my meal, and yet I give you thanks. We can get so tied up in the first 90% of that we are the ones that do these things and not give thanks. I used to think it was an ugly prayer, but the more I looked at it, it brought down to the essence that we can do all sorts of things within our own power, but if God's not in it, if we're not including God in it, it's going to fail. It's going to come tumbling down. We need the cornerstone of God in our life, and that cornerstone is Jesus Christ, His Son, sent and rejected, sent to be killed on our behalf. And it said the Pharisees were ready to take him right there. Pharisees were ready to put him away and kill him right there, but they feared the multitudes. They feared the multitudes. They knew what they wanted to do, but they feared that they wouldn't be able to pull it off that day. And that's why they came by night, because there was few people to turn them away. There's too few people to stand with Jesus. So Jesus is the cornerstone, the proper foundation of our life. God gives us everything we need. He keeps sending messengers to our lives over and over again to call us unto Him and to call us back unto Him if we've strayed. The cornerstone cries out because God cries out. So don't reject the cornerstone. Don't reject the Son of God. If you do, your life will come tumbling down. But with the proper foundation, you build a fruitful life and be given back to Him. Don't trip over it. Build upon it. Don't let it destroy you. Build upon it. Set it as the cornerstone of your life. Come to the cornerstone. Do not reject Him. Let it give you full life, forgiveness, eternal life. Let it make you a joint heir with Him. Come and love the cornerstone. Seek His forgiveness. If you need it today, make that decision during our time of invitation as Daniel and the team sings. If you need to make any other decision public, come and make that decision today. Stand and sing. Step out as God leads you.